How's it going? Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time as a listener, thank you for joining us. If you're a reoccurring listener, thank you for joining us once again. If the subject and the contents of coaching, leadership, and team is something that you're passionate about and resonates with you, think this channel is a great fit, think this podcast is a great fit. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Have a great day. This is Keanu Yamamoto with the Coachers Podcast, in here with Coach Steve Coury, who's an Oregon State Hall of Famer and currently serves as the head coach for Lake Oswego High School. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Please tell us about your family, journey, background, all that good stuff.
Man, thanks a lot for having me. So, the Oregon State thing, I first want to say that what a great experience that was, and what a great university. I still have great friends from there that we stay in touch with. In fact, two of the guys that are on my staff are guys that I played with, and they were graduates of Oregon State, and they have been with me since I've done this venture. So I'm a coach's son. My dad was coaching and started out in high school. He's got kind of an interesting story, man. He started out at Modern Day High School, which is, down in Southern Cal, one of the big time high schools down there. And this is down in the early 80s. He took the program over in about 56 at the time and was there for 10 years. And I mean, his record was just unbelievable at Modern Day. And then he went from, this is the part that's kind of incredible, and you being an ex-coach and me being a coach too, is he went from the head football coach at Modern Day High School to the defensive coordinator at USC. So
That is crazy.
isn't that crazy?
That is quite the transition right there.
That is so crazy. Another funny kind of story that you'll appreciate too. So he's the defensive coordinator at SC, and they played Notre Dame his first year at the Coliseum. And John Hewitt, who had played for him at Modern Day, was there. John was a Heisman Trophy winner that year. Anyway, they played Notre Dame, and they beat SC 51-0. 51-0. So never forget my dad, at home and talking, and I was 9 years old or whatever. And he's saying, boy, I don't know if I have a job when I go back, So they straightened it all out. They actually won a couple national championships. It was cool to be on the sideline. I was friends, if you will, with O.J. Simpson and hanging out with him during spring ball and going over to his apartment. And Earl McCullough back then was a huge track guy. So it was really, really cool for a young kid like me to follow that, be on the sidelines at the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum and watching these guys play. And then he went from there and got into the pro game, and he was in the NFL for 27 years and had a great career. A lot of teams. We don't have time to go over all the teams. One of the teams that the one team that went to the Super Bowl, was at Philadelphia Eagles with Dick Vermeil, and they got beat by the Raiders that year. But so I was around it all my life, and I played myself, again at Oregon State. We didn't have very many winning games, but what a great experience it was, and playing at a high level. And then just loved the game. And so went into the coaching, and I was very, very fortunate that my dad got a head coaching job in the USFL, which there now is the UFL, but the USFL was a spring league, and it lasted for 3 years. It was a great league. We were the nomad team. We started out in Boston, went from Boston to New Orleans, and then to Portland. And then the thing disbanded. But what a great experience that I had coaching with my dad. And then the offensive coordinator for a year there was a guy by the name of Roman Gabriel. And again, I know you're a young guy.
Is that Dylan Gabriel's uncle or something like that? I think are they not related?
They might be. That's kind of a good question. And he was a big time, all pro guy. So it was cool being around him for a year and kind of learning from him. There were some great coaches through that USFL deal. And then that disbanded. And we were here in Portland, and I always loved Oregon, but I took a job with the University of Pittsburgh. So I went back to Pittsburgh, and Mike Gottfried was the coach, and the defensive coordinator there was a guy by the name of John Fox. And John was the guy that coached with the Giants. He was head coach with the Broncos. You might remember that name, but John was the defense coordinator. He's the guy that really got me hired there because we worked with each other in the USFL. So I was there for 3 years. Had two of my first 3 children born there. And I just really wanted to jump off the train, if you will. I mean, I wasn't home a lot. All about that, from the coaching perspective. I mean, it's a full-time gig that people don't understand probably. What people see is Saturdays and full crowds and, the limelight. It's great. It really is big time college football. But for the coaches and the people that work in the offices there, man, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of hours. And I used to leave on Sundays during the season, and yeah, I'd have to get there by noonish and grade our film and all those kind of things. And then I wouldn't see my kids again until Thursday night. And then Friday, we're at a hotel, and Saturday we have a game, and then it's Sunday again. So it's a grind on your family. You got to have a special wife, and mine is special. I've been married 45 years, and she's as good as it gets. And she was a great coach's wife. So it wasn't that, it was more me. And I just wanted to be with my kids more and be part of their growing up. And I look back now as an old dude, and I'm so thankful that I did it, because I got to spend time with them, and I got to coach them. I got to go to their lunches. I got to go to their outings, whatever it was. And then this thing that I'm doing now just fell on my lap. So I was here for a couple of years, just working. And I was working at a trucking kind of industries. This buddy of mine that actually coaches with me, Carl Hallberg, who played with me at Oregon State, his family had a business, and they built dump bodies. So of all things, man, I'm selling dump bodies. I don't even know how to put a gas in my car, and I'm talking to truckers, and it was a real interesting, fun deal. So I'm doing that for a couple of years. And then the thing at Lake Oswego, they had a guy that ended up, they were kind of bickering with the administration. So he ended up retiring from the coaching at the end of the school year. And so they really were stuck without a position to bring a teacher in, because it was too late. And so it was about first part of July, and the athletic director had a good friend over at Lake Ridge High School, where I went to school, who said, "Hey, this guy's back in town. He's got a little coaching background, whatever." And they knew who I was. And so I talked to him, and I said, "Yeah, I can't. I'm working." And so I had a couple of meetings. So finally they talked me into doing it. I said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll do it for a year. And once the year's over, you guys get on somebody that you can hire in the school, and you can have them there like it should be. So they're around the kids, and they can interact with them and get the problem solved and all those kind of things." So I was really signed up for a year of this thing, and I just finished my 34th year. So it's been a huge blessing, man. It's just been a godsend for me, my family, the guys around me that coach with me. I have guys that, like I said, the two guys that played with me, they've been there 34 years with me. The next guy's been there 32. The next guy's been there 25. So I've had a lot of consistency, and now I'm bringing guys back that played for me. The
Yeah.
offensive coordinator now is the guy Nick Hallberg. I don't know if he was around, man, when you were around at Oregon State. Coach with
I don't
Coach
think so.
Riley. He was kind of a graduate assistant, and then he ended up being hired by coach in some capacity, but he went with him to Nebraska, and he kind of did what I did, had a couple of kids early, and just said, when they got fired at Nebraska, just said maybe it's time to come back. So he came back to Oregon here, and so anyway, I put him to work. And then the defensive guy now is Steve Smith, who played quarterback for me back in the days. And I had Steve, he coached with me for about 7 years. And then I had him go to another school for a couple of years just to see what it was like at some other program. I'll just hear him my way, and told him there's a lot of ways to do things. So then he came back, and I put him on the defensive side with my longtime defensive coordinator, and had him learn that side of the ball. And he's a real analytical studier of the game. He was a quarterback at Redlands. He's a quarterback for me. And then I've got 4 or 5 other guys that were players for me that are now back coaching with me, which again, it's just, they know what I'm like, they know what I like. So the program has kind of a steady feel to it. And someday when I step away, I've got a nucleus of some younger guys that hope will stay there and kind of keep things going like it's been. So
Yeah,
that's
that's awesome, coach.
a long-winded deal.
Yeah.
Sorry, so long, but that's
No,
kind
it's all good. I meant to ask you this before we got on, and I didn't realize you played at Lake Ridge. Ed McQuarrie, does that name sound familiar to
yeah,
you? So
yeah.
Ed McQuarrie is my grandfather-in-law. So I
No,
married I married
unbelievable. Yeah, what a good guy. What a
yeah.
good guy. That was a good group over there too. Tom Smythe, I don't know if you remember
Yep.
that and all, but
Yep.
Coach Smythe coached me and was a very good friend. passed away now a couple years ago. That whole group, Royce McDaniels, and there's a whole group of them, man, that really good guys over at Lake Ridge.
Yeah. If you can kind of think back to, when you first stepped away from the college game, kind of what was that transition like? Because I know I had, some growing pains when I first stepped away, and instead of getting yelled at by the coaches for doing poor work, now I'm getting yelled at by my kids, and I rather get cussed out by Coach Bray or someone like that. But talk to me about that transition. What were there some growing pains? Were there some uncertainties? Because I know, like, when I stepped away, I think there's a certain reverence when it comes to being a coach that people respect you, and I think that there's a cool, I guess, honor or title, whatever that may be. But what was that like for you when you first initially stepped away?
You're exactly right. I think that the honor part of it, the part where you're looked up to, by your players and even fans, where they kind of admire the sport world, So I think your ego, has to get out of the way. And I never have had a big ego, but it's still all of a sudden you're out. You miss the competitive part was the thing that really struck me. I mean, I loved, and probably you're the same way because we all got it deep down as coaches, that the competitive, getting ready for that game, planning things out, and then getting in the middle of the game and then having to make adjustments and trying to figure things out, and then having to come back from a win or a loss. The losses were obviously tough, but I miss that everyday competition. Now I'm coaching t-ball, and these kids are picking weeds out the thing, and the competitiveness. Hey, this is all for fun, and I think it really, going into the high school job a few years later, it really did teach me a little bit about, hey, remember, this is a game, have fun with it, where that gets a little bit lost. And I've really tried to keep that perspective. But, the family was so important to me that, I knew all along that I made the right decision. But, changing jobs and trying to find that career thing and kind of what fits and what's going to feel good for the rest of your life as you're thinking about it. And it doesn't, shouldn't be the way you think of it, but it is. And then you got three kids, to take care of. We had a third kid here when we moved back to Portland, three kids to take care of, and a wife, and, all the responsibilities that you have. The path that you were on and you originally chose was something you were passionate about. So now you got to find something with some passion, to be able to do it every day. And like in your case, I mean, I could do what you're doing because I have a passion for my kids, so that's a beautiful deal, man. And then being able to talk to coaches and kind of stay in it with what you're doing, similar to what I did, really. So I was very lucky to have this job fall in my lap. So I'm doing exactly what you and I love to do, which is coach kids, prepare for games. I tell our kids all the time, look, I've been at the highest level. I've been in the NFL locker rooms before games, and been in major college and big time games. We're playing Notre Dame and, Penn State and whoever, and then been in the locker room myself with at Oregon State for big time games. It's not different than what I do at high school. And that feeling you have, the feeling you get before the game, and the excitement and the nerves. And I tell our kids before big games, I'll walk into the locker room before we're getting ready to go out. And I said, God, don't you guys just feel sick? You almost feel sick to your stomach, with the thing. And I said, isn't it a great feeling? Because this too. Where else do you get that? Where else do you get the things that you and I have experienced as a coach and that than you do in that locker room and the competitiveness? Those were the things that to me were scary that I was leaving, and then again, a couple years later, and this falls on my lap, and all of a sudden I got it all back, and life is just beautiful, and then again, the 1 year commitment turns into 34. Man, there's just certain things that are meant to be, and this was one of them. It was a huge godsend for me and my family and the people around us.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. What was kind of the why after that first year? We're like, man, I feel really good about this.
And you're right. I think that, the job that I had at the time would allow it, kind of interesting little side note, really. So I come back here, and the guy that hired me, Carl Holberg, like I was telling you, he had told me when I left, hey man, if you ever decided to come back here, I always have a place for you. And he did that. I mean, did what a true friend would do. And I was with him for a couple of years, about 3 years. And then what happened after that is, so I get the job at Lake Oswego, the year deal. Well, that turns into my next job because one of the kids' moms ran a meat pork deal. Was Oregon Chief Meats was the name of it, and so she hired me as a salesperson. She was just so impressed with me in the interview. So it led to the next job. And then the next job I had after that, and that lasted for a couple of years. Next job was a guy that had graduated from Lake Oswego High School, who followed the fact that I was there and all that. And it was in the carpeted industry. And he hired me. So I was, I was in the carpet sales for probably 3 years, maybe four. Then the next guy that hires me is a Lake Oswego High grad and an Oregon State grad that was there at Oregon State when I was there and used to watch me play. And anyway, he comes to me, just sold his company, and he gets me into the thing that I'm doing today that I've been doing for 25 years, which is field turf, which is the synthetic grass that, that a lot of these places have. Not astroturf, but field turf. But so it's you looking back, everything that happened once I got back here was due to the fact that I was at Lake Oswego High School. Everything was connected back to that coaching job, which makes you just feel like, man, it was just meant to be. So, after the first year, and then I'm working with this gal, and her family, and I'm starting to become just connected and hooked on it. I'm liking what I'm doing. My family's happy. I'm able to get home. All the reasons I did it are in place. And the job wise was okay. I could just put up with it. It wasn't the greatest thing, but I could put up with it. And then the next job was a good job, and I liked it fine. And then the opportunity with field turf came, and that has been unbelievable because I deal with sports people all the time. I'm dealing with ADs and coaches and park and rec people. And so it's fit all that too. So I'm telling you, man, it's just been a phenomenal, lucky run that I've had. And it just keeps going, which is great.
Yeah. You mentioned your pops was a DC, and if I'm not mistaken, you played receiver at Oregon State. What is the first love for you? Are you an offensive guy or are you a defensive guy?
Well, you know what? Became an offensive guy when I went into the coaching part because that's what I knew. You know what I mean? So my dad put me as a receiver coach in the USFL, and that was really my first job. I had a job just for a year. It was 6 months, but it was at a private school down in Southern Cal. A friend of the family's hired me down there, Crespi High School, and it was a great experience and stuff. But I was an offensive guy because that's really kind of what I knew and I was comfortable with. So I coached the receivers with my dad, and then when I went to Pittsburgh, I was the receiver coach. So I stayed on that side of the ball. I'll tell you what always really intrigued me, and it still does to this day, is the offensive line. And I really spent a lot of time in my early coaching hanging out with our offensive line guys. And we had some great guys in the USFL. A guy by the name of Keith Rowan was there. And then Mike Berry was another one. Two renowned guys, really. I mean, within the profession that were offensive line guys. So I used to go in and pick their brain and talk to them a little bit, see what they were doing. And it still to this day intrigues me. And I still love watching our 9-on-7 film from behind and really getting into the weeds of the offense. We've got a great offensive line guy, Chris Hubley, that coaches those guys. But I just have always loved that part of it. Another kind of side note where I learned a lot in a year, this guy by the name of Sid Gilman. Do you know that name at all? Hall of Fame guy back in the AFL days. So back when they started a new league, they had the NFL and this was the AFL, and then they ended up merging them. He was a huge part of that. And look him up sometime, Sid Gilman, the Hall of Fame guy. So he came to the University of Pittsburgh for a year just as kind of a coach that they brought in. Coach Godfrey brought him in to be just an observer and just kind of help us out. And Sid was a good friend of my dad's. My dad worked with him when my dad was at Mater Dei. Sid was the head coach at the Chargers in San Diego. My dad used to do some film work for him, so I got to become good friends. So I knew Sid somewhat. But anyway, after practices at the University of Pittsburgh, right across the street, Sid was staying. So I would walk him back, and this is like 10 o'clock at night, would walk him back to his hotel, and we inevitably go up into his room, and he had a film projector, and we would watch film. Back then, man, listen to this. It was the reels, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you'd have to cut those up and everything else. So we'd go back. So I learned to watch film with Sid Gilman, and it was always amazing when I'm sitting there and he watches the first clip before he runs it back, and he knows what the right guard and the right tackle did, both of them, not just one. You know what I mean? It takes me like I got to watch it 3 times for one guy and then 3 times for the next guy. So learned a lot of football from him, and what a great experience. Again, Hall of Fame guy, and just a unbelievable experience for me to watch the film with him and get to learn from him. So been around a lot of great guys in my short life of coaching outside of this place. So it's been great to learn from those. And I'm really open and really try to learn more and more. So defensively, I'm versed on it. I have a feel for it. The game's changed so much in the last 34 years, kind of back and forth a little bit with what's going on. And, pressure is a big deal. And now the zone reads and the problems that causes. Now we're going back to guys are playing with 2 tight ends again, and so we're reverting back to there. You got to have athletes that run because the game's like a basketball game now. So the defensive side of things is interesting and ever changing, like the offense, but they're trying to catch up, I think, with the offense a little bit now, and they're getting there.
Yeah. Now, just kind of circle back a little bit. I don't know, college coaching maybe about since 17, 18, so maybe 8, 9 years, but I've been around some good
Yeah,
offensive
you
line
have.
coaches. Like when I was at Oregon, and I didn't have as much exposure to them because I was just in the recruiting department. It was Coach Mirabal and Coach Cristobal.
Yeah, yeah, pretty good.
Boise State was Tim Keene, and then come to Oregon State, it was Mihalacek, and then a little bit of Coach Kyle Devan, and then a little bit of Coach Cav.
Yeah,
So that was kind of the exposure to the offensive line coaches. But I am intrigued as to far as why do you find it interesting? Just their approach to the game.
I really, as a coach, I believe it's the most critical part of coaching. In fact, if I was hiring a staff of any kind, that's the first place I would start, would get an offensive line guy, because they've really got to be good, and those guys up front make the difference if you can win games or not win games. If you look around, and a lot of times, like last year, we had a couple of really good running backs, and a lot of times a good running back makes them better for sure. But those guys and what they have to do in their assignments and the intricate part of that offensive line play is critical to winning games. And you show me a team that's winning, and I'll show you a group that has a group up front, and that's to me where it all starts. And I kind of learned that as we went along, as I was watching teams, as I was sitting in those meetings with Roman Gabriel and learning the game from these pro guys really that were coaching. And I was just a kid that played and, loved the game. But that part you could tell was intricate, and man, it was the guys that are playing it are big and athletic, and that they got to have the eyes, and they got to be a really tight knit group too. That's the other thing on a team. If you've got a group of offensive line guys that are a tight knit group, you're going to have a good football team, and the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. So I really I guess figured out that was key to winning and key to having success, is making sure those guys. So I want to know what that was all about. And then once you start getting into it, it's really good. And the guy's making calls and switching and, pulling a guy, and what's that do? And how do we got to lock it? I mean, it's really, really a fun part of the game. You know what I mean? It really is.
Yeah. You were just talking about kind of talent and cohesiveness and how that is imperative for offensive line play. And then just from a broader spectrum, and I know you need both to be successful, but would you say talent or cohesiveness supersedes the other? How would you rate those?
I think that cohesiveness you got to have to win for sure. And then you say, well, you got to have talent to win too. So there isn't a good coach that doesn't have good talent. So I would rather have talent that wasn't quite as good as maybe who you're playing, and have a real cohesive team. You got to have certain amount of talent. You got to have some size and some guys that can move and that kind of stuff. They don't have to be the best, if you got a cohesive group that's willing to battle. And I think that over the years, and I tell our kids this all the time, listen to the guys that are interviewed after big time games that they win, or national championships, or I don't care if it's the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever. They talk about the cohesiveness of the group. They love their buddies. They have a great deal of love in the locker room, trust each other, and all those kind of things. And the winning teams have that. Now, again, they have talent too, but if you're going to give one up, I would give up slightly on the talent part and never give up on the cohesive part. I think that's just critical to winning for sure.
Love it. If I were to ask you, your coaching philosophy, what is important to Coach Steve Coury? What is important to Lake Oswego football?
Well, I'll tell you, number one, like I said a little bit earlier, I think fun's got to stay in the game. I think we've gotten so serious and so much all about winning. Not that you don't want to win, because you want to learn how to compete and win in that, but it's still a game, man, and it's still fun and kids should enjoy it. I see so many kids nowadays with their eyes on the next round, which is college football. You know what I mean? And very rarely are these guys going to go on and play. So enjoy what you're doing here, enjoy your classmates and enjoy that. So fun to me is big. And then I'm huge, and people say this all the time, but it's really a part of our program. And that's the life lessons that you can teach. This game teaches kids more about life than any game or maybe anything that they can do as young adults, coming up, because there's just so many things that you can point out. I'll give you a great example. It just happened this morning. We had a workout this morning with our kids. We work out at 6:30 to 7:30, just Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But today there was a kid so we kind of had gotten started. Our kids are, stretching and doing whatever. And there was a kid standing on the sideline, and he looked, very timid and lost and shy and everything else. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And, "Good. What's your name?" And I said, "Are you here to see somebody?" And he said, "No, I really would like to play." I said, "Oh, that's great." So, I'm kind of saying, here's what you do. You just show up. We'd love to have you, whatever. At that time, there were three senior to be kids, so juniors now, that were probably about 10, 12 yards away, from me. And they were stretching out. A couple guys that are little bit banged up and they're not doing the running that they're doing. All three of those kids got up and they came over to the kid. And I'd walked away by that time, came over to the kid, introduced themselves, who they were, asked him his name, and asked him, was he going to come out? And he said, yeah, they're welcoming him to the team. So I wrote those three kids a text message on my way here, in fact, when I was coming to the office. And I told them, I said, "Hey, what you guys did today is what life's all about, treating people right." I said, you can imagine what that kid felt like. He was very timid, wasn't sure about anything, didn't know anybody. And you guys came up and you made him feel welcome. You made him relax. I said, you got to do that in life. I'm telling my kids all the time, hold the door open for your mom, when you're going into a store or a restaurant or whatever. Lessons like that, man. And again, that's the lessons of life things. I'm huge on that. And I think there's so many times you can point those things out. For our program, it's important to me to have other people talk to our players. Pat Casey came by practice. I know Coach fairly well, and he came by practice. It was during the season, and I had him get in front of the team and talk, and then Coach Brooks way back when came by one time. And so anybody that comes by, I ask him, "Hey, can you mind saying a little something to the team?" Ironically, the thing that happens is they are saying the same thing that I say. You know what I mean? And I didn't prep them. The kids know it. They just walk in. They're not saying the exact thing, but they're saying it in their own way, about leadership and about treating people right and about love and family and cohesiveness and all that stuff. And I think it's so critical for, the kids to hear it from somebody else other than me. And I have our coaches get up and talk too. So I think that's important. And I think when you set standards and stuff, when we've set some standards on, what you put up with and what you don't, we actually just have two rules in the program. We have treat people like you want to be treated and do what's right. And those are the only rules. And then everything else will fall under that. And then I'll decide, what, and I don't mean that the way it sounds, but I'll decide, what might happen to it and what might be different. But those rules are easy to keep up. And again, everything will fit into those rules. And then kids have a lot of stuff going on in their world today, and it's hard being a kid. I got grandkids now that you had mentioned your little daughter. I think it's 4 and going to be 5. And I've got 6 grandchildren, ages 10 to my littlest one is 7 months old. And I love being around them. But, I tell our players, and they're around our program, and our coaches bring their kids and they're running around. But I tell our players that, my little grandson who's 4 here, he knows right from wrong, so when you're making decisions, you know whether it's the right thing to do or not. So I think the lessons in life, man, that you can teach too, and I think we do a really good job of it, keep it in front of them, keep reminding of those things, and make sure to acknowledge it when it happens. Again, that thing that happened today, I took the time. It took what, maybe a half a minute, and just acknowledged it, and told them how proud I was of them. And that's the impact you want to leave with them. And someday, whether it happens that day or someday, that comes back to them. You know what I mean? And I really believe that, and they'll learn from it. So a lot of great lessons in this game. There really is. And that's a big part of the program.
Yeah, when you're talking and you're talking about your players starting to sound like you. This is kind of a two-part. Sorry, I'm going to rant here,
That's all
but
right.
I interviewed Coach Pine. I think
Good dude.
earlier this year or kind of late last year, and that was one of the things he said. Like one of the ways to tell that you're doing a good job or if you're on track as a coach is your players start to sound like you. And not necessarily verbatim, but like when
No.
they're getting interviewed, they're talking about things that you talk about. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the second note was, I went and watched you talk for a little bit at the Nike clinic. And what I respected was, okay, Dan Lever's there sitting in the front row. Coach Pine is sitting a couple rows back. Coach John Eagle is, sitting pretty
Great point.
front and center. Coach Aaron Hazel, like a lot of successful high school coaches are there to learn from other successful high school coaches. And I think that's one thing, and maybe it was just my experience, but like within the college game, I think the college game, people are a lot more hush hush
Right.
with other coaches because it's like, okay, this is unique to our program. We're not going to have this get out.
Right.
At least that was my experience. So I thought it was really cool to just, see all these, local great coaches paying their respects and, wanting to learn from you.
Well, I feel the same way. That was an honor to be able to stand in front of those guys. And those guys are all my friends too. And I have a lot of great respect for them too.
You mentioned a quote. I don't know if this was exactly what you said. This is what I got written down. You said, you encourage what you tolerate, you foster what you celebrate. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that, again, a little bit of standards that I mentioned before, I think when you set things out there, whether it's rules or the expectations, you can't bend those, you know what I mean? So we've had a couple unfortunate incidents that have happened over the years, not a lot of them, but a few. And I've responded to those in a great deal of detail. And so one time there was a episode that the kids decided to go to a homecoming party or something, and we were getting ready to play a game the next week. It was Sherwood, and there were, I don't know, 25 kids or something. And they had talked about this previously in the season, and kind of made a rule amongst themselves. There weren't going to be any of that. They're going to, make sure they're doing the right stuff on the weekends and whatever. And I told him even at that time, and this was a senior group, I said, make sure that you guys don't state something that, all of a sudden isn't easy to do or you're not going to stick with or whatever. Well, they did. And what I did is cancel the game. And I'm not kidding you. You would have thought just in the public thing that, wow, you can't do that. You know what I mean? And our administration at the time, so we're practicing that Monday and the game's canceled Friday. It's Sherwood. Sherwood wasn't happy about it. And I don't blame him, but anyway, our administration sent the principal down to practice, and she said, "Hey, they don't want to cancel the game, so they want to handle it in some other way." And I said, "You go back up there and tell them if they're going to make us play, I quit." And I'm dead serious, and she knew I was. So she came back a little bit later. Okay, they're going to let you do it. My point in telling you all this is you got to stick with whatever the consequence, whatever the rules, whatever the standards that you set. So if you tolerate that, and it could be small things, being late, hey, guys are chronically late to practice. If that's something that you just don't put up with, then you can't put up with it with some and not with others. A guy that misses a practice. I don't have rules that say if you miss a practice, you can't play, but there's teams out there that have those kind of rules. You miss, if you're not at 5 workouts, you can't, practice with it, whatever they are, the rules, then you're going to put those out there. You got to live by them and you got to stick with them. Otherwise they're not. So that's the tolerate. If you're going to tolerate parts like that, that's what it's going to turn into. You're going to have a group that has no respect for whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's why I stated that. I'd learned that from somebody and it stuck with me.
I did Coach Brett Elliott last year too, and that's one of the things he said. Exactly what you're saying, except
He's
you did a lot better job explaining it than Brett did. You
he's a
did a
good
lot
guy.
better job.
So I got to tell you a quick story about him. So we're playing a playoff game. He's a hell of a quarterback, right? And we're playing a playoff game. He's our punter too, and we're up on it's mountainside on the other side of the mountain. And Jerry Hackenbrook, real good friend of mine, is coaching over there, and his son, who used to be in LO, because Jerry was with us, and then he moved over there, and his son was a heck of a player. Tommy, he went to University of Utah, and so we're beating them 14-0. It's the first quarter. I mean, we are kicking their tail, and now we're punting for the first time. Well, Brett takes the ball and he gets it and he looks around and there's nobody coming, no one. So he decides to run with the ball, right? So he's going to fake punt. All we need is probably 3 yards. So I'm thinking, wow, he's got nobody. And then he was so slow by the time he got to the line. There were like 5 guys and we didn't get it. And they come back and they end up beating us pretty soundly. But I always tell him, I said, I still blame you for that fake punt that you did on your own. So,
That's
but he's
funny.
done a great job there, and he's a really good football coach.
No doubt. He is. It was fun. I got to work with him, I think, for one season
Oh, wow. Okay.
at Linfield. Maybe not even. I think it was the like three games, and then I
Oh,
was fortunate enough to get the recruiting job at Oregon.
oh,
But
great.
anyways, what would you say, some of the greatest challenges are right now within the coaching realm?
I think with high schools, all I can address nowadays, but I think the social media world is, and we're facing that probably in every phase of our lives, but the social media world, the guys wanting to get, not only guys, but the kids wanting to get clicks and living by that phone, and the information you can get, and the information they want to put out there, and just on and on. I just think it's something you can't control, and it's something that they live by, and it's something that affects their thinking, which to me is really bothersome, whether it's in my case with the football side of things, people telling them how good they are or they're not good, or, whatever. So they listen to that, and that world in their hand has a say about who they are and how good they may be or not good. And so that part of it's really tough. I think the world that in sports now, to me, that bothers me is the money making that's going on. And what I mean by that is the trainer and the experts that are out there, and the expert trainers, and the expert, the guy that knows the recruiting end of things and knows all the coaches and can get you on the list. All those things, that 7-on-7 and that whole world, all those things that are, and I'm not down on the 7-on-7 world at all, but it's a money maker, more than it is anything else. And that's great. They make money doing it and everything else, but the false sense they give the kids, and not even the kids, but the parents, about the kids and how their talents are and how good they are and where they can get to and all, that's just such a false sense of their abilities, really. And then that gets blown up, and then now all of a sudden the high school coach is the guy that, hey, well, they told me over here and he's not even playing here, so it kind of skews things. It really does. And I think it's, again, getting to the parents more than it is to the players, but it's a combination of the two. And I just think that, I just think people are making a living on it. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with making a living, but I think parents, and I try to, school them on it, that here's reality. You know what I mean? You don't necessarily need this guy to become a great player. You're 5'6" and you weigh 135 pounds, and that the good Lord gave you that. And that's kind of where it stops. Do all you can to make the best of it. But again, like I said earlier in the show, enjoy what you're doing. But so yeah, man, it's a little bit of, it's a little bit frustrating. It's a little bit more, people have asked me before about parents, and, I live in a very affluent community, and it's a great community and great people, but you must have trouble with your parents. And I haven't until probably and I don't have troubles. I really don't. But last probably 5-7 years, there's just more involvement. There's more
Yeah.
communication. There's more things they want to know. There's more they're hearing. There's things they want to know why, whatever. And so that part of it, makes it a little tougher. I mean, I'm too far down the road, and, I'm not like some of these younger guys that, are going to have a bunch of conversation. My door's always open, but they come, I tell them the truth, boy, so, I don't get a lot of visitors. I really don't. And again, I think we do it right. We treat them right. What else can you ask for a coach? Not going to
Yeah.
get them a scholarship. That's just life. We got a few guys that get scholarships. They're blessed with some pretty good talent.
Yeah, no doubt. I've never coached in a high school game, but I feel like that's got to be tough to delineate because, especially as a parent, as you know, and now that I'm, starting to realize, like, you're trying to do what's best for your kid,
Right.
and you know that their intentions are well. At least most of the time, their
No, you're
intentions
right.
are right.
No
Um,
doubt.
so I feel like it's hard to. I guess I don't know where I was going with this, but as
No,
far
you're
as
right. It's understand it. I tell them all, our parents, I'm a parent first. And I really mean that. Everything I do, it comes from a parent side. So I do understand that. You know what I mean? I really do. And like you say, it's for the love of the kid and they want what's best for him. And he has such a desire to. I get all that. And I don't blame him. What I try to tell them is just have your expectations be realistic. You know what I mean? Yeah, set goals. There's nothing wrong with that. But just don't let it get out there where, you're going to play at Ohio State when, hopefully you can play at Linfield, whatever that might be. So I think that keeping things within reality and again, I'm a parent first. And I'll tell you something that's tough. And coaches out there, if you got coaches listening to this, some of them have probably been through it, and others that are your age are you're going to be coming up through it maybe. And that is coaching your own kid. I mean, at the high school level, it's tough enough when they get to be sixth, seventh, eighth grade. You keep your eye on them all the time. I had my two boys played for me, and they were good players, thank goodness. But I made it tougher on my oldest one. He was the first one through because he was my son, and I didn't want people to think, well, I'm playing him because he's my son. He was. Our coaches had to come up and say, hey, coach, let us coach him. So it's really hard to separate that. Now, here I am, the head coach. Hard. And that's my kid. You know what I mean? And I made it tougher on him than I should have. But believe me, I was proud of him and I was watching him and I wanted success for him and all the things that the people up in the stands, they wanted the same thing for their kids that were playing down there. So I get that, I really do. And I try to tell the parents, if there is ever a time that we're not treating your son right, then that's a conversation we need to have. Or if we're missing something, you know what I mean? Maybe we miss something. Maybe there's something that we didn't see, or maybe there's something that, we've ignored or whatever. And I'm not beyond admitting that either, but I'm in it for the kids. I really
yeah.
am. I'm dad before I'm coach, with all those guys. And I truly love them and I want the best for them. And the other thing I tell them, there's only 11 that can play at a time. You know what I mean? So there's 50, 60 guys standing on the sideline, that aren't playing. So it's just part of the game too. And again, that's kind of lessons in life that we were talking about earlier on the podcast.
Yeah, let's dive into the coaching your kid dynamic a little bit. I had Coach Mannion on, and that was one of the things that we talked about, and I think he had an assistant coach mention to him, or he had a colleague or a mentor. I can't remember what the exact context of it was, but it's like you can't let your kid's performance during practice or the game alter your mood in the sense like, okay, he's having a good practice. Okay. You're a little bit more gleeful having a crappy practice and it throws you off. I guess the other thing with that is like, because it's your own kid, like, did you compensate how you coach? Like, were you tougher on your kids? Can you kind of talk about just those dynamics a little bit?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I was tougher on my oldest one. And this is what happened. My wife, after a couple of games, said to me, we're sitting around on Sunday having coffee or whatever. And she said, you know what? You don't, his name is Jordan. You don't treat Jordan like you do the other kids. So what are you talking about? So, well, the kids do something that you're patting them on the back and you're making sure that they know when your son does something. You do, but not to the same extent. And she was absolutely right. You know what I mean? I was trying not to be the guy that looked like I was favoring my son. You know what I mean? So I was conscientious about that. And she was absolutely right. She said, you need to start treating your son like you do the others. And it gave me a great lesson in life. She had to grab me and straighten me out. And I made it a rule when I first got there that I am not going to have guys that have kids in the program on the coaching staff. Just didn't want that dynamic, right? Well, as we grew through it, and our kids were coming up. So there were probably 5 guys now that have had their kids grow up and now they're in the program. And you talk about tough now. There's a couple things that happen. We talk every day just about personnel. And we go around the room like, hey, how are the receivers today? And how the DBs and whatever. And everybody just gives a dissertation. We rate players. I do it a couple times a year. Let's rate you guys. Everybody does it. Then we average it out and we find guys. Hey, the 11th best player is Jimmy, and he ain't even playing. Why the hell not? Well, he's behind. So, well, let's move him. You know what I mean? So we make changes. But the personnel talk gets into the kids. So you're sitting there as a dad, and all of a sudden, and I told them all too, that, hey, this is a coaching staff, and we're coaches. We're not the dads. So you guys got to be able to separate that. And so we get talking, and it's, yeah, he's not very good, or he's not whatever. Now he's a backup guy. And that's a hard thing for a dad when you're sitting there, to kind of hear it. And it was always tapered down. But reality is there were some guys that had their sons, they were backup guys, at best, and they hope for them to play. And we try to get them to play like we do all the kids, not just because they were dads, but tough deal, man. And the other part that I was going to say that's tough is they coached with me. And again, I didn't want dads coaching, but it was just inherited, so they coached with me. So what happens is, like, guy that's coaching the offensive line, his kid's a fullback or his kid's a receiver. Well, you know where his eyes are, right? He's, what's going on? And wait a minute, I'm running a drill here, you know what I mean, with my lineman, but I'm wondering what my kid's doing. Again, very natural thing to do, but it just makes it tough on a coach, and hey, we got to coach your players, make sure we're doing that. We'll take care of your kids. So we've had some rocky deals, to be really honest with you. No game changers and no friendship lost or anything, but some real trying times, some hurt feelings that you couldn't help, it just had to be said, or we had to demote him, and the other guy has to play, and whatever else that might be. But it's tough when they're your best friends, you guys you love, you hang around with, their families, their wives, the whole deal. It's a tough
Yeah.
scenario.
Well, that made me think of, my high school experience, and one of my good friends, his dad played O-line at Washington and then played O-line for the LA Rams for a
Oh,
while.
wow.
And just their dynamics, and the coach was already a freaking tough ass and one of my favorite coaches because he was just a straight shooter. And that's, I didn't like it at the time when he was cussing me out and I was, making me freaking cry as a freshman and so on and so forth. But like, it made me a lot better. But just
Right.
like you talking and then me looking back at their relationship, like, the dad was naturally already a freaking hard ass, but he let his son have it, because like it was the expectations were high, but he let his son have it, and there was a couple times where it almost got close to like fisticuffs, and his son's a big kid now.
Yeah, no
And
kid.
his son played at UW as well.
Oh, did he? Wow. Yeah, you're right. It's just there can be some conflict, that's for sure.
Yeah. What would you say, have been some of your greatest moments within the coaching world?
Coaching with my dad was really a highlight for those 3 years, and then when he retired from the NFL, he started coming here, so I invited him to come here, "Hey, just come and hang out with us for some weeks," so for about 9 years, he came up here at the start of fall, and he was around our staff for probably about 5 weeks. He'd get us started into the season. Then he would come back late in the year and then be through the playoffs. And it was, what it was, man? It was missed time, I would say, when I was growing up and he wasn't around. And I have no regrets for what he did and the life we had. I'm one of 7 kids, and my mom's a saint. She's still alive, gonna be 95 in August. She really, again, with the coaching deal, she really kind of brought us up, and she was around at all the things. My dad just wasn't because he was working. So when he came up here and spent that time with me and my wife and my kids, it was so special, just being around him. So that's really, really close to my heart. And then with the 34 years that I've been here and the friendships that I have within the staff, first off, and their families, we've all grown up together. We've raised our kids together. We're all very close now. I mean, during the season, we go out on Thursday after practice and go to dinner somewhere, a lot of us. And then after the game, we always have an after game coaches gathering, and they all come. And so the times that we're together and the times we've spent over the 34 years, we've become great friends, and our wives are great friends, and the kids, everything else. So that part of it to me has just been, again, something that I cherish. And, it's just been you look back, it's gone all so fast, to get to this point in our lives. But just really, really lucky with those two things are the things probably are the most important to me in the coaching ranks and what it's brought for me here at Lake Oswego High School for sure.
Why is the sport of football the greatest sport?
Well, I just think it gives you a lot about what life gives you. Again, I'll tell the kids all the time, you get knocked down, you better get up. You know what I mean? It's like life. And I tell the parent group when we meet for the first time every year that we're going to be competitive, so best guys are going to play. We're going to try to play a lot of guys, but it's competitive. Well, you know what? The world's competitive. It's competitive out there with your jobs and in what you're doing. It's discipline, like right now, like I told you, we're getting up at 6:30 and they work out at 6:30 in the morning before school. Well, take some discipline to do that, so you got to discipline yourself to do it and get up and make sure you're there, and so there's another key to life, having discipline and then hard work. I tell our kids all the time that, hey, this game's hard. It's hard. Otherwise, instead of 70 guys here, the whole school would be here because it's fun. Friday nights is the greatest thing in the world. And we get packed house. And I mean, there's nothing better. You know what I mean? And you guys kind of control the attitude of the school, but it's hard work and it's discipline and it's a grind and, all those things you got to go, well, life's like that. It's the hard work is what you got to do to get ahead and keep ahead and take care of your families and your people and whatever else it may be. So I just think it's got so many. You and I could probably talk for another hour about just some more of the lessons that happen. And I just believe it has them all. And whatever you're going to deal with in life, you're going to deal with in a football program and being on a football team.
What's a drill or team period that you guys do that that you wish you did earlier in your career that's been beneficial for you guys' growth and success?
Yeah, filming things is the thing that, probably is the most important thing, that we've done, and we've done it for most of my year. In fact, you mentioned Steve Pine. Steve's a good friend of mine, has done a great job at Central, and now he's at Union. You just a very good football coach. He came to me one year, and we were just talking. We went out to lunch, and hey, asked me about the program. And I said, the number one thing that we do, in my opinion, is watch film. And he says, wow, you film? I said, yeah, we film practices and we watch it. Well, how do you take the time to do it? We just do it after practice. We take the time. Guys will do it on the weekends on their own. We study us a lot more than we study any opponent. So we get better as the year goes on. And he kind of took that. In fact, when he kicked my ass in the finals one year, he came up and said, hey man, that tip you gave on watching film really helped. And I'm thinking to myself, why did I even tell him that? But so that's one thing for sure, that we do. I'm not a contact guy, we do no hitting. We do no live stuff. We thud, which is kind of live, but we never go to the ground and we never tackle, and we'll do tackle drills, all that. So we've never been a live team at all. And that's just a philosophy. And a lot of it came at the very beginning when we had very little depth. I mean, we hardly had any players, and no depth. And I sure as heck wasn't going to lose them in practice. And I think some of that, as we got better and we went along, we became a team that when playoffs came, we were really fresh. I mean, we weren't beat up. We didn't beat ourselves up in the practice, and not that you're not hitting and doing those kind of things, but so that's another thing that, that I think has been a big advantage for us. And again, that's just a philosophy. It doesn't work for everybody. And people would say, well, you gotta hit, you gotta tackle. But I've had a lot of teams, a lot of coaches say, man, your team is physical and plays physical. And I think they do. So, but those two things are probably the two things that would stick out for me as far as a coaching.
Yeah. Anything from a untraditional statistic standpoint that you guys might chart that, might just be unique to the program? For example, Boise State was, if we could hit the quarterback 10 times, we felt pretty good about the outcome of the game because that's going to change his process, how he stands in the pocket, just his presence, how he calibrates things. Coach John Eagle, they're talking about just how fast they like to go on offense. Like for them, okay, how many times they don't get set and how many times, if they get someone to throw up on the defense. Like for them, that was like a, here's the pup, by the way. Told you the
How
pup
about a
was gonna
coach
come by.
throwing up? Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
That's dog.
But Yeah, is there anything from, untraditional statistics or things that you chart that you think is unique?
Really chart, I mean, our guys do, but I don't spend a lot of time on it, with the statistical stuff. But more and more now, our guys that are the younger guys are doing that. It's easy to do, and take it for what it's worth. The one thing that offensively that I say that really needs to be in the game plan is you got to make some big plays. If you're going to score, you got to make big plays. It's got to be a 40-yarder, that's a touchdown, or guys got to break a run. You got to have a couple of those in the game, or you're going to struggle to score. To go 80 yards, for six first downs, and all that. It's tough to do. So big plays are big. We try to script them somewhere in the game. We try to have 4 or 5 of them going into the game. We try to not come out of the game without attempting them, whether it's a trick play, whether it's a deep throw, whether it's a play action that we think we got a chance at a big one. Those are things that, and at the end of games, and really when we talk about charting, when we get to a point mid-season and you're starting to look at what you're doing and what other schools and places and teams are looking at, and they're seeing you do this and that, and the formations and all. We kind of try to study ourselves a little bit. If we're not scoring a lot, you'll know that we can look back and we're not making big plays, and we've had big play running backs last year in Bam and LaMarcus, and made big plays all the time. The quarterback made big plays. We made big plays down the fields. We were hard to defend, but it was because of the ability to have a big play every now and then. So big plays are big in a game.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that, coach. If you could coach any player, past or present, who would it be and why?
Wow, that's a tough one because I've had some great ones. I think that the kid that just left here is obviously the freshest one in my mind, which is LaMarcus. He was a class kid, a hard working kid. You just love those guys that have all the God given talent. And again, we've had quite a few. I've been very fortunate at the high school to have those kind of kids, but you love the kids that are the hard working kids, the kids that are the leaders, the kids that love the younger kids, the kids that get along with them, the kids that make everybody feel good. That we had Tyson Coleman, who was a kid that played for us and went to University of Oregon. He was a running back and ended up being a linebacker there. He was a kid that his sophomore or junior year he was offered his sophomore year from Oregon. Yeah, he was a running back for us, a big kid. Anyway, going into his junior year, he kind of copped an attitude, and I told him this, and he knows it, and we've talked about it. We're good friends today, and I really had him playing sparingly in the first 3 games as the running back. And the University of Oregon guys called me and asked me, was he hurt? Was guy said, no, he's probably about the 3rd best running back. What? I said, yeah, I just, I don't know. He thinks he's bigger than life. And so anyway, he goes to Oregon. He comes back his senior year. And I'll tell you, he was the hardest working kid that we've had. He took the ball every play from scrimmage in practice and ran to the goal line. And that sometimes was 70 yards. And I mean, every play. Worked hard in the offseason. So he got whatever it is we were trying to teach him and what Oregon was telling him. So then he went down to Oregon. He got in a little bit of trouble as a freshman, and Chip Kelly was there, and John Neal was the defensive back coach. And John told me, hey, called me up and said, hey, Tice got in a little bit of trouble. And coach is friggin' on his ass. He wants to run him out of here because he's not sure he's our kind of guy and, whatever. And to the credit of Tyson, he took it all and he stuck with it. Now, my whole thing in telling you this long-winded story is I really believe what we did with him helped him when it came time at Oregon to get through what he had to get through. And he came through in flying colors, played in a couple national championship games. He was a starting outside linebacker. I mean, it's a great story, and I think, again, lessons in life, I think he learned a little something. And then when he got in that trouble and then he was on that bad list, hey, there's only one way out, and that's to work. And he just put his head down and worked his way out.
Oh, that's a good little anecdote right there.
Yeah.
Good anecdote. My college roommate was Lake Ridge's quarterback, Tom Connect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of all around the same time because I think Coleman's is around the same grade as us.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. Tom was a hell of a player. I loved him. I was hoping he would come over to our side of the lake, but
Hey, don't tell him that. Don't tell
over
him
there,
that.
man, couldn't get him over there.
On top of that, if you could sit down with any coach and ask that coach any question, dead or alive, Who would that coach be? What would that question be?
The guy I love seeing is the old Bucks coach that's on TV now once in a while, John Gruden, and him with the quarterback guys. I would ask him probably what's the most important thing for a quarterback to have? What's the trait he needs? And can you teach it? Can you coach it in him, or is it just innate? Whether
Yeah.
it's leadership, whether it's the strong arm, whether it's, the vision, whether all the great quarterbacks, I think, and even in high school, the ones that are really good. And a lot of times you go from his junior year to his senior year, I think, and really maybe at any level, and you've been at those levels, the game slows down with them when they're ready to really take the next step. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh shit, where do I got to go? It's real slow, and it just develops and they see it. And so, it'd be interesting because I think he's really good with quarterbacks. I love his character and the way he is and his enthusiasm. And yeah, it just seems like such a good guy. It'd be fun to get in a conversation with him.
Yeah. If you were to answer your own question, what would you say?
God, I don't know what I'd say. I'd have to think about that. I really would. I don't know what I would say, and I don't know what that question would be, for my own self. I really don't. It's a great
Yeah.
question.
Because like to be honest, it's like there's just so many different degrees of quarterbacks, and especially like if you watch like the John Gruden sit
Right.
down talks that he does, like one of the most impressive ones. And I don't watch a lot of them, but I'm kind of enamored with just the aura or character of the Diego Pavia kid, who is
Right.
not who is not your traditional quarterback, but
Right.
that motherfucker wins now, and he has so much confidence. And to like going back to how the game slows down for them, is that from hours of preparation, or is that just like this,
I think a lot.
just a lot of freaking confidence in oneself?
Experience too. Yeah, and,
Yeah,
and quarterback's got to have cockiness. He's got to have sureness of himself. He really does. But I think that the experience you can really see, especially in high school, and I probably the same in college too. You can really see the difference in the year before and then the next year. It's tremendous growth. We had a kid that's now at New Mexico, Zach Lane, who was
yeah.
a good quarterback. We made him a quarterback. Tim
His
Hayes.
brother is at Oregon State now, right?
See,
Yeah,
linebacker, yes.
yeah.
And Dylan played for us too. Great kids, hard working kids. But anyway, the quarterback kid never had played quarterback. And then his freshman year, he played quarterback. We made him quarterback because he was an athlete. But anyway, he was a hard working kid, studied the game. I mean, he's like a coach on the field. We'd call a play and it'd be, oh shoot, they went into cover two and hope he goes to the tight end. Well, that's where he would go. It was like he was us out there. But anyway, his growth from junior year to his senior year was phenomenal. And it was all because he just understood it a little better. It slowed down a little bit more. He was confident, all those kind of things took over. And
Yeah.
those guys that can step in, like if you're a first year rookie or you're a freshman into a big time college, I mean, those guys just have something about them, boy, that they're confident, they believe in themselves and they let it rip.
Did he play defense for you guys at all too, or
He
no?
didn't, because I never let the quarterback play defense, but
Gotcha.
yeah,
Because
but
like the thing I'm thinking about is the North Texas quarterback who
yeah.
wasn't even the starter in high school,
Yeah,
but he was a
exactly.
hell of a safety. And then next thing you know, he's like, that's what I'm thinking. Like when you can just see the game differently. Like maybe
Right.
you had extensive experience on the other side of the ball.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, you're seeing it from a whole different perspective.
yeah. Gave you a heads up on this before we got on the Anela question of the day. My daughter gets to ask a question for the guests, and
Great.
her question was, "What's your favorite vegetable?"
And I'm a vegetable eater, so that's kind of a trick question because I'd have to really think about it. But I would probably say broccoli is the one that I love because I love it steamed. I love it with a little bit of cheese on it. I love it cold. I love it in a salad. So I'd have to give it to broccoli. Tell your daughter that broccoli, but I've got a lot of them.
Okay, okay. I'll make sure to relay that. The other
All
one
right.
was, "What's your favorite Disney princess?" And I didn't think you'd want to answer that.
Yeah. I wouldn't know.
Yeah. What does the word team mean to you, Coach?
Team means a group of guys that are all about the team rather than themselves. It's got to be a team concept. Just what it says. It's got to be all about all of us. It's got to be we, not me, and that's what a good team's all about.
Yeah, you mentioned you guys aren't really a contact team. That you guys stud up a lot. So how do you go about creating healthy competition and I guess creating edge at practice, and just without tackling? How do you know your players are tough
Yeah, great.
outside of the trenches?
Yeah,
Outside of the
great.
trenches.
Well, I think that we do the tackling circuit type things, you know what I mean, that are real control type stuff. So we get the fundamental part of it down. We get to the ball in practice and have a breakdown like you're going to make the play. So that's kind of been enough for us. We find out some aren't as good at tacklers, and be really honest with you, sometimes it takes a couple of games before we look like we can tackle, but that's kind of the sacrifice that we make because of it. And the contact stuff, I just don't, I think we get enough of it with the banging around that we do anyway, the guys up front for sure. And the competitiveness comes, we do 7-on-7s or 1-on-1s, and that becomes very competitive. We keep score. Sometimes we're moving the ball. We try to change things up like that. We do the same thing, offense, defense, moving the ball, getting first downs, having situational type things. So try to get the competitiveness there with the kids. But you bring up a great point, and our guys bring it up all the time. Can we do things that are more competitive? They're always trying to talk me into doing some more contact and hitting. And so far I've been able to hold them off, but it gets a little tougher every year. I got to tell you, coach, these guys get on me, and, I said, well, hey, we've had pretty good success so far, so let's not ruin
No
it.
doubt. No doubt.
The first time, and they know the first time we lose somebody, then coach is going to come unglued. When somebody goes down. In fact, our defensive line guy, Greg Lord, and our offensive line guy, once in a while they'll go down on the baseball field and do drills down there. And to be honest, I just know there's stuff going on that I would probably say, "Hey, cut that," but they get away from me.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff, coach. And just to go back on that point, I mean, credit to you. You've been doing this for 34 years. I'm sure there was some games that you may have lost because of maybe a missed tackle or two,
No, you're
but
right.
like just being able to stick to, what you believe is to be effective. Like I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think that, we believe in it, and again, kind of what you and I were talking about earlier, standards, just it's kind of the way we do things, and we do believe in it. And it's at some point, maybe it's got to change. You know what I mean? It's gotta be different. But so far,
Mm.
so good.
Oh yeah, I mean you got 3 state championships and it's not like you ain't got zero.
We've been really, man, it's been a good run with a bunch of great kids. So it's been a lot of fun, and great coaches too. So yeah, it's neat. What's really neat about that, really, that I talk about more than is we've been there 9 times. So
Yeah,
what that says to me is, number one, we've been successful, but it's hard to win it. I mean,
no doubt.
to win it. You know what I mean? And there's been times in those 9 where the 6 that we didn't win it, that we were probably twice a better team. And there's still good teams that you play when you get there, but the other ones, they were better than us. So it's definitely a hard thing to do, man. We're excited and proud of the fact that we've done it.
It was funny because I asked Coach Rutschman, what separates, a good team from a great team or a good team from a championship team. And you just speaking about that, making it 9 times. This dude talked about every game or like every playoff season where he felt like they could have won the national championship and were bumped out by a team that did win the national championship.
Right.
He could
Right.
go back and recall like what happened in the game
I'll bet.
and
You
and
let
and
it out.
why. And I was
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
geez, that's freaking impressive. Talking about culture, what are some actionable steps that you guys do at Lake Oswego to help, build up your guys' team culture
I
and
think the
what you value?
number one thing is, and if you heard me speak, I talked about this, making the 65th or how many guys you got on the team, make that guy feel like the number one guy. And so I think you really got to let the players know that you care about them. And, you'll see me if you ever come to our practices. And by the way, you're welcome anytime, but I'm hugging the kids, and it's true. It's not phony. And you can tell phoniness too with that kind of stuff. So I think that it starts with caring about them. You care about them, and then you're fair to them, and you communicate with them. And then it creates a family atmosphere. I say all the time that I run the program like I run my family, if you will. Raised 3 kids, and now, like I said, we have 6 grandchildren, and I really run the team just like I ran my family, from a discipline, from a love to, kick them in the butt when they need it and hug them when they need it, understand mistakes, understand that they do the wrong things once in a while, and all those kind of things. That to me is the philosophy, and that's what's built the culture and what it is. It's got a good feel to it. It really does. And I think the kids and I think the families that have gone through it, the kids that are currently in it, would say something very similar, to that. It's just they treat you right, and they feel loved. They really do, and they feel like they're important, which they are. Everybody's important. Everybody's got a role. So it's not only said around our place; it's acted on.
Yeah. You talked about this a little bit in your presentation as well. You brought up Coach Eagle was the example you brought up. But what do you do when your team faces a setback or a bad loss?
Where we learned a lot, like I said, in that thing you're talking. And you know what's kind of interesting? John and I have talked again, a good friend and just a great guy and a hell of a coach. When we beat them the year before, then they kind of changed things they were doing. They had a little running back that was a hell of a running back, and they had a big offensive line, and they were started running the ball more, and we played them the second time in the championship. And they just kicked our ass. And the guy was running the ball, and he was so small but so good, but you couldn't find him. You know what I mean? He kind of changed what they were doing. He challenged his kids more so. And we kind of did the same thing. We got beat by them, which was a damn good football team. If they hadn't have been hurt, that would have been a heck of a state final game with us and them, I think. But they really, after that game, we did a reset, we called it. We took our kids bowling instead of practicing, and just kind of, hey, let's relax, and hey, we got beat, and we're still a really good football team. And I tell you, we had a different team after that. We played really well, played together. Body language that was somewhat apparent once in a while disappeared. Egos were in check, and they were all in for the team, and it really showed. I mean, we really went through the playoffs in a very easy form, if you will, for playoffs. And again, the final game, was lopsided. We beat a real good team in Central Cap. Just a lot of things went our way early, and then it's tough to kind of catch up. But that game was over by mid third quarter, and the clock
Hmm.
was running. And so our kids just really took it to heart and then played as a unit. It was really because of the reset idea, and hey, we got to all be on the same page. So yeah, it was great. But John Eagles guy, I have a great deal of respect for, and that program over there won't miss a beat with Anthony Newman taking it over. He's a hell of a coach too, and got their same guys, and they got a bunch of good players.
What's Coach Corey's bowling score? Are we at 150 plus? What do we got? Are you a curve guy?
No, no. If I break that 100 mark, by the time I'm in frame 7, I'm hurting. The arm's a little sore. You know what I mean? So wasn't easy, man. That bowling.
Can you kind of talk to us, just about how you establish a sense of shared leadership with the team, and then maybe your captain process if you have one?
The captain process is we have 4 different seniors every week. So as a senior, you are a captain in one of the games, and we have somebody that takes pictures of them out being a captain. So it's kind of a privilege as a senior guy. And then as we get into the playoffs, once all of them have been captains, then we'll get it down to kind of the 4 leaders, or might be a rotation even with that, with 6 of them that lead. So we really don't have a captains per se. The seniors, I'm big on saying that you're only as good as your seniors in your senior class. So they've got to be all the way through from guys that play to guys that don't play, and accept their role, and they're good scout team guys, and they're good teammates and all that. The senior class is going to dictate how the season goes. They're all captains, if you will, and they've done a good job of that. And we also tell the younger guys that, hey, you can be a leader too. Just because you're a sophomore doesn't mean you can't be a leader. But that senior group is good, and they take over the ownership. We have a sign in our locker room that says "Tradition never graduates." They pass it down, and pass it on, and they're reminded all the time of, hey, what was the last group like? What did you respect from them, and what faults maybe that they had? How was it in this locker room when we're not around? And on and on. Try to pass things down, and all of them take a little bit of piece of it.
Yeah. Aside from winning, what other metrics do you use to define success as a coach?
Guys come back to the program. Guys stay in touch with me in their adventures in life, and to me, that's the real story. We've had number of kids that without football, I'm not sure where they would be, and that's a great success and a great feeling for a coach. And yeah, again, I say me. I mean, all these guys that have coached with me are very much influential to these kids too. And those are the success stories. They really are. I mean, again, we're competitive, we want to win, but those are the ones that we love to see. We have a kid that's coming back that played back in the early 2000s that was coming back and going to be a part of the program on the freshman team. So guys that want to be a part of it, we have a thing on Thanksgiving. If we're still playing, we have just a set deal that at 10 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, we have a practice. And the last few years, it's been when you're in the finals. But last time we had, I believe, was like 120 guys that came back to that practice. That's success. That's success. They feel a part of it. They want to be a part of it. Their experience there was great enough that they come back, and they're not all players, not all guys that play. There's a lot of role players that come back, and they all speak to the team, and you have a little something to say to them, and it's just a really cool feeling as a coach having those guys come back. Again, they don't have to come back on Thanksgiving Day when they're with their families and everything else to take the time to come back and say hello and say something to the team and tell them how proud and feel connected again and all that stuff. That's the success of the program.
If you could go back and give your younger self some advice or give young up and coming coaches some advice, what would that advice be?
I'd say drive, towards whatever your passion is. Mine was coaching, and it happened to just work out that it was this level. I would say for any guy that's out there pursuing the coaching ranks, you get the same feeling like you and I were talking about, the same satisfactions, and maybe even more so at this younger age of high school kids than you do at any other level. There's some great feelings at both the other college and pro levels, but the things you can do here, and again, the things we were just talking about the wins and the kids you've helped and the lives you've changed, that's a life fulfilled. And that's what you can do in the coaching ranks for sure, and especially at this level, in the high school level, and these days and ages where kids need good mentors and good people to follow and to be like, really. So that would be my advice.
Yeah. Any final advice on coaching, leadership,
No, man.
life that you'd like to share for the good of the community?
I love it. Again, I treat mine like my family, and I'm a real family guy, and I think that, the love for people, really. I mean, I love people and enjoy people and try to treat people again like I want to be treated. And that I was really ingrained in me through my parents and the way we were brought up. So I think it's a great way to live. It's a great model to have as a person. But it's a pleasure being on your show. I appreciate the time and look forward to chatting again sometime, man. Come by the practice one day if you ever get an opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt, Coach. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for hopping on and imparting your wisdom on us, Coach.
Yeah, it'd be great to be with you, man. Look forward to it next time.